Today, we have Soumya, Kiran, and me talking about something that we always I wondered about a lot, and that is early retirement. Now, turns out there's an entire movement dedicated to early retirement, and Kiran is going to shed some light on this movement in just a short bit. But what we're going to do today is basically talk about the FIRE movement. For those of you who haven't heard about that, like I said, Kiran's our man. But what we're also going to wonder about is this something that is a strategic move, or is it something that is actually born out of compulsion or a lack of choice for a lot of people where they have to think about early retirement? That's basically the topic for today. So, on that note, Kiran, it's over to you. Please help us understand what is the RE movement all about?
I'm going to be on
I
mute for
like
the
it.
next.
I think it's funny that you ask an entrepreneur about retirement. And before this show started, I know y'all both predicted that I would say a lot about entrepreneurship, and it's not retirement, and it's not the financially right move to make, and blah blah blah. But I think when I was like early on in my career, in my 20s, I always had a goal that I would retire fairly early. I think most people do, right? Everyone wants to at some point dream that they could retire at about 40, 45 remaining years or lived in luxury with zero sort of, requirements or any of that.
Stress.
Yeah, no stress, nothing. Yeah, financially independent, beautiful life. I think that's pretty much a dream for 99% of the people. There are some who can get to do that, which is very fortunate. But I think it kind of remains a dream for most. And the way I understand this fire movement is, where people are trying to desperately capture that moment or make it happen one way or the other, right? Whatever it takes to kind of desperately make sure that by a certain age, I am now financially independent and I can retire early, right? It is a very, very conscious move to make that happen. For all of us, I think it was more like a dream. We always talked about it, but I don't think we did anything to consciously make that sort of move to retire at 40, retire at 45, whatever it may be. But I think this movement is about consciously doing it from day
Yeah.
one. Which is amazing. I think kudos. I don't know if it works because, again, it's fairly early. We're seeing the start of another movement in another term. Amazing. We have too many of these already. But I don't know. I think, it's a combination of now that I'm beyond my 40s, I think my big sort of thought process is, have I contributed enough? Have I done enough where or do I still want to do more? So it's no longer about retiring early. It's about, contributing and making sure I can do whatever I thought I wanted to do from a life perspective. So I think that also sort of changes as you go through life. Initially, you just want to make money and you want to, make sure that you're retiring early, for me at least. Then I moved to this mode where I was like, I need to start growing in my career and I need to make sure that I kind of become relevant from a career perspective and, as a leader in companies. Then I said, okay, let's get into entrepreneurship, which was, oh my God, the most amazing journey, which I will never recommend to anyone. But I think now it's more about the fact that I still don't know if I were to kind of, let's say, have enough to retire tomorrow. I don't think I will stop working.
Okay.
Because I don't think I've given enough. But anyway, I'll stop at that. As Soumya rightly predicted, it was a long answer.
No, but it's interesting what you're saying, right, Kiran? I was going through a lot of people who want to retire early, and these folks aren't really talking about just stopping doing their work and being home and maybe being stress free for sure when you don't have the burden of having to earn a certain amount of money to sustain your lifestyle and all of that. But people are also actually talking about what you are saying, right? We want to do contribute, we want to find that meaningful work and purpose in whatever, which suddenly seems like people are not finding in their current jobs. So I see that common thread in what people are sharing. Like, even when people say I want to start something of my own, that's a part of a lot of people's retire early plan as well. What they seem to be saying is we want to do something that we are passionate about, which we are not able to do right now.
Yeah, I think, yeah, you're right. It's about taking control back. I feel a lot of it is about that. It's about control. And it's interesting to see, right, how, work has developed over the years. And again, I'm coming back to I mean, don't say it's a cliche, the pandemic, right? It's kind of forced all of us to think really hard about what do you really want from life. It kind of taught you about how transient everything is. It also kind of made us really scared about a lot of things, and it also kind of made us reprioritize what we wanted from life, right? Like Kiran, to your point, you wanted at one point, it was about the glamour of entrepreneurship, for example, right? But today you feel like you have so much more to contribute, so it's not about retiring in the sense you'll sit back in a lounge chair and read a newspaper with your feet up, hopefully sipping a margarita. But it's about doing something else as well, in addition to being able to do that, having that choice and having that control, and then also meaningfully giving back to society in any way possible. Maybe in your case, for example, more time to do music, I'm guessing, for you here, right? It could just be that, right? Or Soumya, for example, I don't know, more time to travel. So I think a lot of people want to do that, and hence the birth of this fire movement. But it also, I mean, the fire movement is specific, right? If we go back to that, it's based on a lot of save today for tomorrow kind of attitude, right? It's a lot of frugality that is required, which we saw during our parents' generations, didn't we? Isn't that similar?
I mean, the most of the kind of articles, videos, and examples I've seen of people following the fire strategy, they are not looking at, many of them are not even looking at families. It's either a
Mm,
couple or
mm,
it's an individual who's basically saying, hey, I want to live the next 5, 10 years completely independent financially, right? So I guess it's also a very different path from that perspective if you want to kind of consider where people want to go from a life perspective. Um, so I think the other big thing also that's starting to happen is with this whole gig work and gig economy kind of coming in. I think it becomes easy for you now to go live in the jungle and still be able to kind of produce 20 hours of work every week or every 2 weeks and still make enough to survive in that jungle,
mm,
right? So I think the concept of work has gotten so flexible that it becomes easy for people to kind of spread their wings and go wherever and kind of do whatever they want. We have Soumya over here as a case in point who does that. She's very often in a different city when we're talking to her, and which is awesome, right? That's amazing. But I think that's also a result of where work as a concept is going. You don't have to be bound by a desk and a chair and in a glass enclosure. You can actually be anywhere and be able to contribute in more and more roles
mm.
nowadays. So I think it's a combination of those two.
Yeah. I think knowledge work, for example, is more outcome based, or is becoming more and more outcome based, or should become perhaps more outcome based. It's very scared to use words like should, but at this point, at least, it's like we've been talking to so many people, and like it's not about location. It's not at all about location, though the focus seems to have moved to location, location, location. Are your people in office, or are they at home? Are they remote? Are they hybrid? All of that. But it's not really about that. At the end of the day, is the work getting done? Are you getting what you have hired this person to do? And when that comes to the fore, it doesn't matter anymore where you are. And you're right, like, therefore a lot of these movements, but it still feels a little, let's say, traditional in my mind, right? Because and I come back to it because I've grown up in a conservative household where it was all about saving, 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 saving for a future. Don't buy today because tomorrow you can buy something better and maybe bigger, hopefully. Or don't buy today because tomorrow you will need it. What if? What if? Right? It's always
But
about that,
that's not the fire movement. But that's
but it
not
does
the fire
become
movement, right?
pillars for
Our
the.
parents were kind of, your baby boomers and all of that were in when just the industrial revolution had started and it was starting to kind of pick up and there were new industries coming out. But it was all about making sure you're saving to be safe.
Yeah,
It wasn't
true.
making sure you're saving to live a retired life. That was
Hmm.
very rarely the notion because everyone would definitely work till at least 60, if not
That's true.
more,
That's
right?
true. They were not
So
retired.
retire early, yeah, retire early was never a question, right?
Yeah.
In fact, you would make sure that you stayed in a company for 15 years and then maybe you jump two or three jobs in your career and that's about it,
Mm.
right? And you're
Right.
there till 60, 65, whatever it may be. So I think it's a very different concept, though. I mean, yeah, both had elements of saving, but
Mm.
with two very different end goals.
Goals. Yeah. 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 In fact, it's interesting to note, right? They worked till 60, 65. You're talking about a career that spans, say, 40, 45, 50 years, maybe. But
Yeah,
now, are we seeing that careers are not that long anymore, right? In fact, there was this very interesting Ken article which came out, which said that 40-year-olds are being forced into early retirement because a career is typically lasting not more than 20, 25 years, and that is
yeah.
also scary, right?
I think I'll let Soumya go, but just before that, I think what's very interesting is now if you see there has been a huge influx of people in our generation, whatever you want to call it. I don't know, what are we now? Millennials? Whatever what are we?
Yeah,
I have no
shift,
clue
shift.
what we are. But anyway,
Doesn't matter.
there's that group of people who are in the leadership ranks, who should technically be in leadership ranks within companies.
Mm,
Now there's a huge number of them,
yeah.
right? And there aren't enough leadership positions today, perhaps in corporate America, corporate India, corporate Europe,
Mm,
wherever it may be, right? And so a lot of these people, and I know a lot of them, where instead of trying to keep fighting that corporate ladder, which is becoming tougher and tougher to climb because there are just so many people and there's so much competition to get that role and keep climbing up, it becomes easier for you to extract yourself from that and just be a consultant or just
mm,
be a freelancer or set up a small boutique consulting firm with 3 people or 10 people and then just run it as a lifestyle business, right? So I think that is also a very important sort of consideration to place when we're talking about people who are not really retiring early, but maybe they just want to extract themselves from that race and continue to just make money rather than having to fight for that CEO role and the CXO role and whatever it
yeah,
may be.
yeah.
I think
Hmm.
Soumya,
the
your
I,
turn. We've been talking too much.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think the freelance space, though, I think there's a need to constantly reinvent yourself, right? So that your career span as a freelancer, especially when you have these youngsters who come in and there's that perception that they're really good with the latest technology that comes in, say, even if that's using AI for content generation or whatever, or content creation because they grew up in the world of Instagram and everything. And I think at least as freelancers, there's the constant need to reinvent yourself. When I often think about retirement, I don't think that as coming from my personal choice. I often wonder and plan for retirement, thinking that one day I could become redundant to for this industry, right? Then what does that look like? Or if I turn 60 and I'm incapable of contributing physically and mentally, then I'm planning for my retirement. So retirement looks like that for me right now.
Yeah, yeah. And it's also a scary time, right? Because, I mean, at the end of the day, nobody's job is secure today, right? There was a time when, someone pointed out to me, there was a time when jobs were lifelong things. And you just said that as well, Kiran, that people maybe hopped to 3 jobs max. In fact, people look down on, your resume if you had too many jobs there, right? If you didn't last for more than, say, 2 years in one job. So jobs are a lifelong thing. But now it's not often the employee's choice to, quit a job. It's also the other way around, where there are layoffs, there is economic uncertainty, there are many challenges, you could be made redundant, right? So these are things that, people, therefore they keep saying, oh, you should have a second stream of income. It's extremely important that you have a backup plan, or a, whatever. So I guess all of these things considered, and also, the fact that we cannot afford the things that our parents could afford at their age, at this age, at, during their time. For example, simple thing, buying a house, right? It's becoming more and more expensive. It's becoming a goal that is getting pushed and delayed for a lot of people. You're hearing about stories of 20-year-olds who cannot leave their parents' homes because they have massive student loans, for example, right, sitting on their head. So that burden of, these financial burdens are not going anywhere, therefore forcing people to kind of think what happens. And it's not a bad thing, right? It's a good sign. It's also a sign of maybe the times that we're in. Maybe we'll reach a place where people are like, no, okay, we're all is well, we will stop saving so much and live only for today. Who knows, right? It might come back.
I also think our advantage and disadvantage is the fact that that one person that Kiran spoke about, who probably were successful in retiring early, we have a lot more visibility into what their lives look like right now. So that has become very aspirational, right? Because we suddenly feel like, oh, this is really very accessible. This is what I'm seeing. And we actually do see, I think, in the world of digital, where content creators are kind of probably achieving those, and that's being displayed for us to see as well. So I think for that generation, they have that sort of visibility, and that's also creating those aspirations to a great extent.
Yeah, actually, you're right, because now you're seeing so much of it, right? Before you had no idea. But then what, like you said, like Kiran, to your point, what do you like? I've heard of stories, people are talking about, like, how 1 out of 3 early retirees, right? Once they've actually achieved this goal of retiring early, thanks to the fire movement, for example, then they go into depression. They're like, what then? So what would someone like that do, right? You have so much to give, for example, but what do you do if you're stuck in that situation? So it's always about, you keep saying don't go into entrepreneurship, but it is almost like the only path ahead of you, even as a freelancer. In a way, it's an entrepreneurial and undertaking, right? You're still doing something as a business on your own, right?
I think retiring early is almost a fallacy, in my opinion. As in the world we live in the capitalist world we live in, I think it's very, very tough to do for any individual, because you always have more needs and more wants.
Hmm.
Even if you have a house, even if you have a car, even if you have 3 houses, you will want the fourth, right? You'll want a beach house, you'll want a house on the hills, you'll want one in the town, blah, blah, blah. So I think the retiring early is for a very, very, very small fraction of the people that live in the world today.
Hmm.
When you think about the larger kind of thing, some they just don't have that option because they're just not in that place from a financial, economic, position. It's impossible for them to even dream of retiring early. So we're actually sitting in a point of privilege over here talking about that.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
I think 90% of the world cannot even afford to think of that, right?
Yeah.
So I think once we kind of break that part down, and then let's say we're talking about the privileged ones who can do it. If you think about entrepreneurs who have started businesses, let's talk about the really successful ones, who started out of their dorm rooms, became billion-dollar companies. They
Dropped out of
sold
Harvard.
out. Yeah, sold out. But they still want to start the next one, and then the
Yeah.
next one. And then, you'll still keep going, because I think the human brain cannot stay too long without being challenged, right? At
Hmm.
least, most of us. So even retiring early is a good sort of catchphrase, but I don't think it really happens. You will still continue to push yourself to do something that is contributing in some way or the other to this whole capitalist, world that we live in. And unfortunately, I think most people, there will be some people who disagree, and maybe comments will start now. But I really think it's impossible for anyone to think about retiring early if you are embedded in this capitalist world that we live in. And so,
Mm. But that is a choice thing. Sorry, Soumya, you had a point to make. You looked like you really wanted to.
No, I was just wondering. Yeah, because when people are saying retiring early, I think a lot of them are also trying to escape the capitalist world, right? People aren't really talking about, like I said, quitting working. I feel they're talking about quitting that glass building. They're talking about quitting that 9 to 5 that they have to prioritize over their personal lives, the 9 to 5 that they have to prioritize over what they think are their passions. So I feel like retiring early is also a struggle against the entire capitalist system where we're trying to be like, I want to take ownership over my time, the way I live, and all of that as well. So
Like you said,
one side.
go live in
that's
that
fine.
jungle.
You'll go to the jungle. You'll go to the jungle, and then you live in the jungle. And then after 10 days, you'll realize that, with no gas and no electricity, it is a big chore to continue life. You will then want to make sure you can buy something that can solve for that problem. There will always be something else that you need to get. There will always be something else that you want, not need. Maybe not even need, maybe not even electricity and gas. Let's assume that's also taken care of. You will want to have a deck chair that you can put out with a umbrella, and you could sit outside and work. Whatever it is, there's always going to be something that you and I will always want. The moment you do that, the moment you want that, you are living in this capitalist world. It doesn't matter that you've disconnected yourself from a corporate entity, but you are still living in that world, right? Ideally, what you should is, if you want to really extract yourself from the capitalist world, then yeah, there are Buddhist monks and what have you who probably do that really well. But I don't think that's reality. When you extract yourself from corporate, it doesn't mean you're getting away from the capitalist world.
Yeah. But here we're talking about people who do it by choice again, right? What about the people who are being, like you said, the bloated leadership, upper management, where there is no space, and you're being forced into, say, retirement, you're being forced into taking up, say, consultant gigs or freelancer gigs, or forced into starting, like you said, your boutique. What about those guys, right? What are the things you can do to not get pushed out of the workforce? Because there are people, like you said, want to contribute. I don't want to quit anytime soon, for example, right? What do you do then, right? Because there's still going to be a
I think
dearth.
yeah, but there are a couple of kind of parts even to that, right? There's a fork over there. One is the people who choose to get out because they don't want to play that rat race anymore. Um, and those that get pushed out because there's no more place for them
Mm,
in the corporate world. So if we were to
mm,
look at the first one, which is they don't want to be part of the corporate rat race, like what Soumya was talking about earlier, I don't want to be a part of this corporate infrastructure and I want to get out. I can get out and I can start a consulting gig, you know, working with a lot of companies from a B2B sales perspective. I know I have that experience, more than 20 years of doing that. I know how to kind of, go in and build a sales engine from an enterprise perspective. That's something I am very comfortable with. And maybe, if I didn't have to do this or if I didn't want to do this, I would get out and probably do that. Right. And I can still earn a decent amount. It's not going to, get me my Ferraris and all of that. Maybe not yet, but I can still survive and I can manage my lifestyle as it is. So that's the first set. The second set who are getting pushed out because there's no
mm,
more place for them in the corporate ladder. I think they're the ones who kind of try and figure out what they want to do, and that's
mm.
always the biggest differentiator. I think people who get out knowing very clearly what they want to do is not the ones who are potentially getting pushed out, right?
Yeah.
And so the ones who still have a lot of figuring out to do, and that's, I may sound cold now, but the fact that they don't know what they want to do is also perhaps the reason why they get pushed out from the corporate rat race. Maybe they wanted to be in it, maybe they wanted to kind of grow, but if you as an individual are unsure where you fit in, I think it is very tough in today's economic, market, labor market, whatever it is very tough for you to hold on to your role
Hmm.
because no CEO wants to hear from, and I'm talking more from a CEO perspective now. I don't want to hear any one of my leadership team coming and saying, "Hey, Kiran, I actually have no clue how I can contribute.
Yeah.
I have no clue where I can contribute, right?" And if you're not taking initiative, and that's the difference. Again, I might sound cold, but it is reality. Is if you are not taking that initiative and showing where you can make a difference, you don't have a place because there are 10 others who could potentially be hired or moved around within the company or whatever it may be, who can potentially bring that opportunity or talk
Hmm.
about a new opportunity and take initiative and go out and get it right. So I think that's the difference. Anyone who's unsure, that would be my warning signal, is that, hey, maybe you need to figure it out really for yourself before you actually think about moving up the corporate ladder, because that I think is the biggest differentiator I've seen over my years.
Yeah, no, very, very valid point. In fact, one of the things that keeps coming up when, for example, when I was doing my research on this is that, it's the difference between being a lifelong learner and being somebody who's like, I have already accomplished everything, and I am entitled to, for example, being in this position. So there's a lot of entitlement for a lot of people who believe that there's, I'm leadership now, so there's no need for me to learn anything else. And that is a huge difference as well, right? For example, the advent of AI is scaring so many people because they're like, oh God, okay, I'm going to be obsolete now. But then how do you keep growing? I think that is something, that agility is something that people need to keep practicing so that they don't really get pushed out. Of course, there are many cases where it's unfortunate, right? And I know you were being cold. I'm also being a little empathetic and saying that there are cases that it cannot be helped, right? No matter how much you give, no matter what you
Yeah,
do,
sure.
there are situations where you have been pushed out because that's just the way the economy is shaping up right now, right? But then I guess the good thing is, like you said, Soumya, we're seeing so many people out there who are uh, rediscovering themselves, who are rising up again in spite of it, who are discovering alternate career paths. And we have so much visibility into these lives that it's actually aspirational. It kind of makes you think that there is hope. It's okay. You will get there, maybe, if you just work hard enough. I don't know. Am I being too positive, too optimistic?
How do you see it, Soumya?
No, I don't think so. I generally look at the positive side of things. So I wouldn't say that Debbie is being too positive about it. I I think to each its own. That's
Hmm.
all I can say. I've taken an early decision in life to quit the corporate rat race, if I can put it that way, for certain personal reasons and for reasons that we discussed right now, right? And I think I'm not planning for a retirement where I'm sitting and sipping that margarita like Debbie said, but everything that I'm doing right now is that form of retirement for me where I have more control of my time. I have more flexibility the way I do things. So that for me is probably the reflection of the kind of retirement that I see a lot of people talk online as well.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
But I go
Some
back to the fact that that's not retiring early. That isn't, right? That is the flexibility that work affords you today. And that's
Yep.
because work has also changed. Even 15 years ago, the role you do, people would have wanted you in the office 24/7, right? There's no freelancer gigs and all of that. It was way less common. So I think the way the world is changing, yes, there are a lot more people who can afford to say, I'm not going to work 9 to 5. I'll work 8 hours a day, but it'll be across my spread through the 24-hour period, right? So that I think is very different from
I
people
agree.
who are talking about retiring early, right?
Yeah, yeah. In fact, I mean, that's what that people who have retired and actually successfully retired early. For example, at the age of there's one guy who retired at the age of 27, where he was like, okay, for 5 days he sat at home and played video games for 6 hours and did nothing else. And he was like, I can't do this, and he went back into the workspace again. But he went back on his own terms, like you're saying, right, Soumya? He went back where he could choose his hours, he could choose his work, and that kind of flexibility ultimately is what everyone hopes for. but it's, again, it's tough. It's not for everyone. It's not for every what's the word, profession, for example, either. And yeah, so I think, I don't know, do you think the fire movement is here to stay though? Like, people are have, I mean, we've got a term now, but do you think uh, it's going to stay? Because like you said, previous generations didn't think like this, but this generation is thinking like this now. Will this continue? Closing notes
If
from
if
everybody.
if fire movement starts at the age of 45, 50, I think 100% yes. I think it's staying. It's no longer 60, right? Or it's no
Mm,
longer 70. I think
mm,
it's come down where you can afford to potentially make and invest enough by the time you're 45, 50, where you can actually retire, right? You can
mm,
make sure that your children's education, everything is taken care of, your retirement is taken care of, all of that. If you're talking about less than that in an earlier age, I don't think it's here to stay. I think it's for the few. I think it's just a fad from that perspective.
mm,
But I will say that fire is actually interesting because even moving from a 60, 65 retirement age to a 50 is a huge change.
yeah.
Economically, if you see that starting to grow per capita in every single country, I think that'll be a huge change, right?
Mm,
But I think the exact opposite is happening today because every country other than India actually has like aging economies because they don't have enough young people, so people are forced to stay at work more.
yeah.
So yeah, that's my only caveat. Lots of caveats over there, but
Even
that's how I
in
see it.
even in India, in fact, the Ken article that we were talking about, the number of people who are above the age of 60, I believe, is increasing year on year, even in the
Mhm.
Indian corporate space. So it's going to be interesting to see when that trend shifts, if it is going to shift at all, because we know that India, for example, is a very, very young country. So I think that's a topic for another day, though, about how that younger generation is going to enter the workspace and what's going to happen there. Yeah. Any other closing words from either of you?
No, I think people are going to be fired up about the fire movement for sure. How many actually attain that goal, like we
You
discussed?
waited the whole episode
Yeah.
with for that one line. I know you had prepped for that line like for the last 2 days.
Sounds of
100%.
fun. I love it.
But yeah, let's see how many of it or how many people actually attain that goal. Yeah.
Awesome.
But that was a
Thank
good line. Thank you. You liked it.
Awesome, awesome.
you. The minute you said it, we're like, oh, that was coming. All right, great. Thank you so much, everyone who joined in. This was fun as always. We'll be back again with another fresh new trend or topic in a couple of weeks. Until then, it's goodbye.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.